Okay, so this is more like a prerequisites for the augmented scale because there's so many different sounds you can get out of this scale. The opening, for instance, was based, that I just now turned down, was based off the augmented scale. Okay, it could sound very chaotic. However, don't always throw just one mood at a scale. Now also, try to look at scales like this from every possible angle. What kinds of chords it normally forms, like the augmented chords, plus the enharmonic major and minor chords, okay? And all the polychords. So it's made up of basically a minor third, a half step, a minor third, even though it's written as an augmented second or a raised or just a chromatically altered, okay? It's pretty subjective whether I write this as a G sharp or an A flat. I mean, you could do it whatever you please as long as you have the same notes. So what I mean by looking at every possible angle is, let's just start right now. If you take the root and then play the augmented second, it's still a minor third sound. So you play a third up from that to the G, well, you have a C minor chord, enharmonic, okay? And these are enharmonic chords you can get within this scale. And you could also raise that D sharp to E, and you have a C major chord. You could raise the G to G sharp, and you have a C augmented. Now, trying to fit a scale like this into some kind of set rules is probably not a good idea. Try to drop the traditional functional rules, okay? Because that will actually limit you. You're not looking to do any kind of functional harmony here. You're not going to get any chord progressions at this. So on the second degree, we just get this augmented chord we pretty much spell when it comes to basic triads. And that's the same as a B augmented or a G augmented. So on the third degree, same situation happens as the first. We can form a minor sounding chord. We could form a major sounding chord or an augmented chord. And E augmented is basically the same as C augmented. Remember that. It's the same set of notes. And the same as G sharp augmented. So on the third degree, starting on the G, the fourth, we get another augmented chord, which is the same as an E flat augmented. Okay, same set of notes, inverted. So going back to going to the next note, the G sharp. Again, you have this situation where you can enharmonically have the sound of a minor chord, a major chord, or an augmented chord when it comes to basic triads. So, and the G sharp augmented is the same set of notes as E augmented and C augmented. Also, just bear in mind, this is not a beginner theory. So if you don't know your beginner theory, I would suggest skipping this. So the last chord we have is the B augmented, which is the same as the D sharp augmented or the G augmented. Same set of notes. Okay. And most people will just stop at this aspect of just saying, well, there's just two augmented chords within this scale, and that's pretty much all you can do with it. No, that's not true. There's a lot you can do with this scale to action, and we're going to show this with examples later on. So again, you're not limited to these augmented shapes, okay? Just keep this in mind. I often look at scales like this in the same way I do as pandiatonic music, which basically means, well, without this become pandiatonic music video, anything goes within the scale. So, which leads me to do this point. We can form like a C major chord over a B augmented, which kind of gives it that C major 7th sharp 9 sound. So this is why I say this is not a beginner video, okay? Or you could also just consider it like a polychord, C major over B augmented, okay? This part's completely subjective on how you view that. And speaking of polychords, if you could take the C augmented and put it over the B augmented, and you get a very dissonant kind of chord, which is very useful for a lot of effects in film scores, for instance. And any inversion of the augmented chord will work. Augmented over augmented. So we take the C major shape again and do it over the B augmented or major 7 sharp 9, whatever you want to call it. And you move that to the E major shape that you can form and do the same thing over these major chord kind of sounds. And you'll notice the augmented chord I'm using every time when I'm forming this is the same augmented chord as the B augmented. So in addition to that, you could also do these chromatic mediant kind of effects okay, with the major chords, because you're not looking at this with any set of rules, okay? And get that flat 6 kind of sound just by using the enharmonic equivalently sounding major or minor chords. So in other words, looking at this in a pandiatonic way, there's no rule that says you can't use a chord that's major sounding or minor sounding over these roots that are a third away that can form that enharmonic sound of a major or minor chord. You could do a C major 7th, a E major 7th, a G sharp major 7th kind of sound. Just the sound. We're talking enharmonically, the sound of it. So that's what I mean by looking at this in a pandiatonic kind of way of thinking. So another thing I could think of off the top of my head right now is you could produce that minor major 7th sound by using just one augmented chord and changing the root. So that would be a C minor major 7th, G sharp minor major 7th, same augmented chord over the top shape. And then the E minor major 7th, same augmented chord over the top. So that one shape will produce the minor major 7th over each root. It doesn't matter. And just an interesting observation, that augmented shape is going to be common to all C minor, E minor, and G sharp minor harmonic minor. So you could do these all kinds of interesting polychord effects, minor over major, okay? C minor over E major kind of shape. You're not limited to, that's why I say look at this pandiatonically. Don't look for really strong chord progression. So anything goes. I mean, pretty much if I could play the C major and C minor, same set of notes, it's going to produce this chromatic metic kind of sound. And it sounds almost mysterious now. That's why I said don't throw a label at the scale. I'm just using notes from the scale. So that's as close as you're going to get to a chord progression, but it doesn't really sound resolved. It just kind of sounds mysterious. However, what I'm really trying to get at here is when you're dealing with a scale of limited transposition like this, like the augmented scale, if you don't want to be limited by this, don't look at it as just working over augmented chords. Use all these possible shapes because it'll actually help you create really cool and interesting chaotic music besides relying on like the diminished scale. That's the number one relied scale, or bitonality, or 12-tone techniques, whatever. I'm always of the opinion that the more harmonic aspects the better off you are, and the less limited you are when it comes to creation. You can use the augmented scale, as we're going to see in this series, for a very comical kind of sound. And every scale that I've run into has multiple different stylistic sounds. That's why when you show somebody Dorian, for instance, they think it sounds medieval just because you're showing a bunch of chords, but Dorian's capable of sounding very bluesy, or it could sound kind of ethereal, or it could sound like a lot of hard rock styles, or even popular music use a lot of Dorian bass progressions. As well as a lot of jazz pieces of music have used Dorian as a basis. So that's what you want to think of the augmented scale. It doesn't have one particular sound. You may get multiple sounds out of it. And we're going to show you this